Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Prime Minister, the Honourable Leader of Opposition, Honourable Ministers and Honourable Members of Parliament. Mula Vinaka, good morning, Ram Ram and Namaskar. I stand here today to support the motion by the Attorney General and Minister of Economy on the 2022-2023 budget appropriation. Mr. Speaker, from the onset, please allow me to congratulate our Pacific leaders on the adoption of the 2050 Ocean Strategy for the Blue Pacific Commitment with the special focus on climate change and disaster. The strategy focuses on our faith, cultural values, traditional knowledge, resilience, and a shared mission, which will reflect as building blocks for the 2022-2023 national budget. Mr. Speaker, the Global Assessment Report 2022 highlighted that extensive risks are growing at an unprecedented rate, where the impact of disasters are cascading across all sectors, creating new challenges which needs to be immediately addressed. From the recent flooding in the New South Wales, Australia, to the volcanic eruption in Tonga, and from the compounding impact of COVID-19 crisis to the current war in Ukraine, we must come together as a country to ensure that we achieve the commitment set in 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Paris Agreement, and Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. Mr. Speaker, this year's budget is a budget that is prudent, responsible, and visionary focusing and build the value of family, security, justice, true democracy, and equal opportunity. Because of the government's consistent, strong, and innovative leadership, this budget will allow our economy to recover smoothly over the worst economic crisis in history, providing the pathway to recovery of the national economy as well as the pathway to recover right down to the family level. Mr. Speaker, this 2022-2023 financial year, the NDMO has been allocated $1.4 million to ensure that we are not only building back better, but building forward better through this inclusive and resilient budget. The 2022-2023 national budget aims to simultaneously facilitate Fiji's recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic and mitigate the impact of Russian war with Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, this war in Ukraine is significantly contributing to global inflation, the serious implication of global financial system. People globally are facing cost of living crisis not seen in generations, according to the latest finding by the United Nations General Secretary General Global Crisis Response Group on food, energy, and finance system. Here at home, we are not spared as we grapple with the impact of COVID-19 pandemic and climate change. This is the reason, Mr. Speaker, a strong leadership and innovation that is present in this budget will pave the way forward for the nation. We cannot do this alone, but together, all Fijians, and with the timely assistance from our development partners, will bring us through this crisis. On this note, I would like to acknowledge the Australian government for its investment of $1.3 million towards the renovation of our Western Division warehouse complex. This new building will provide the state-of-the-art and conducive building and environment of first responders working tirelessly in disaster response operations in the Western Division. Further support was rendered to the construction of the NDMO warehouse at the Black Rock facility in Nadi. This will greatly improve the capability of the NDMO to prepare and respond to disaster both locally and regionally. Earlier this month, Mr. Speaker, over 90 pallets of non-food item NFIs was airlifted from Brisbane and it's now pre-positioned at the warehouse as we are now 3 months away from the start of the cyclone season. In partnership with the Japanese government, a total of $8.9 million has been committed to the extension of tsunami siren in strategic position from Lemi to Reki. An additional $25,000 has been committed this year to the maintenance of emergency equipment such as tsunami sirens and high-frequency telecommunication equipment installed across the 4 divisions. Another $9,000 has been committed to the maintenance of flood early warning system in Nadi and Ba. Mr. Speaker, A people-centered disaster risk reduction approach is our way forward. In partnership with our Australian humanitarian partners, over $1.2 million has been invested on upskilling our communities to be disaster ready. In additional $10,000 has been allocated to ensure this work continues. Mr. Speaker, as we all know, data is the key for making informed decisions for all stage of disaster cycle, ranging from baseline information on the vulnerability and capacity of the risk community to provide the basis for target interventions on relief and short and long-term recovery. This has been alluded to in the comment made by Deputy General Secretary of the United Nations, Ms. Amina Mohammed, that we need to invest in stronger data capabilities. Mr. Speaker, in this regard, government has committed $25,000 towards the maintenance and management of National Emergency Operations Center for disaster preparedness and for monitoring and coordinating disaster response and relief operations. We are also working with the Pacific Disaster Center in Hawaii in harmonizing data set to improve our operations. The National Disaster Management Office has also developed and will soon launch its revamped website that will be an online portal and one-stop shop for disaster risk and emergency information for the general public. Mr. Speaker, government is also committed to ensuring that disaster risk management in Fiji is multi-structural, inclusive of embracing cross-cutting issues, including gender, disability, environment, and other thematic areas, which inform the whole of government approach towards disaster management. Mr. Speaker, thus, this allocation by government for strengthened the integrated database will decrease silos and increase interoperability and coordination across the government agencies and stakeholders. Mr. Speaker, we all know that disaster risk reduction is not only a humanitarian issue but a development one. And this budget provides pathway for the mainstreaming of disaster risk reduction into the pillars of infrastructure, health, and education. Government recognizes that just by investing $1 into disaster risk reduction, we are going to save $7 in disaster recovery when a disaster will hit us next. The government has approved a budget of $50,000 for the mainstreaming of 122 action items under the National Disaster Risk Reduction Policy across government agencies and civil society organizations to enable a continued focus on priorities and plans for structural and non-structural measures to elevate the impact of disasters. Such investments will help the navigate complex risk area faster and in more targeted and efficient manner. Mr. Speaker, even with the 2 years of COVID impact and lockdowns, the Fiji government works on mainstreaming DRR across all thermic areas has continued. I'm proud to say that we have achieved the following milestone thus far. Economic sector, 43 action items in progress. Administration sector, 36 action item in progress. Infrastructure sector, 23 action items in progress. Social sector, 19 action items in progress. Mr. Speaker, I assure this August Chamber that we will continue this momentum and we will not going to make excuse that will prevent us from continuing to build forward better. Mr. Speaker, NDOMA is also developing an online risk screening tool that will equip provincial administrators and district officers with the ability to safely determine the viability of proposed community development project. This risk screening tool will also help them determine risk reduction measures for these projects so that government and community investments are safeguarded from disaster, climate and health and social risks. This is all part of the contribution towards minimizing development risk and to ensure that our hard-earned development gains are protected. Mr. Speaker, we all must work together to ensure that give a voice to the marginalized group who are often forgotten or who are often among the most vulnerable and natural hazards to ensure that the interests are adequately addressed and the rights are protected. It is critical to consult the key implementers and beneficiaries on the policy development phase, allowing more opportunities for a bottom-up approach. In partnership with the International Immigration Organization and QUICA, a total of $12 million will see the construction of 4 evacuation centers and retrofitting of few more. This initiative with the partners will enable the widespread dissemination of good practice in evacuation centers, design and construction. Mr. Speaker said, these evacuation centers are multi-purpose in nature and during peacetime will serve as business incubation with promoting centers and rural communities. To furthermore complement this initiative, Mr. Speaker said, government has committed $20,000 to further development of evacuation center retrofitting guidelines to standardize the construction and management of evacuation centers around the country. On this note, Mr. Speaker, I must thank the management and the leadership of schools, community halls, and other buildings commonly used as evacuation centers for their continued support to government in the use of their facilities, as we are grateful for this vital community service that is the key component of disaster risk and response. Mr. Speaker, I must reiterate, in order to collectively manage complex disasters, we have to work together and forge partnership at all levels. The NDMO is working closely with government agencies and development partners to combat the impact of disasters and climate change and to build resilience on all Fijians through community-based disaster risk reduction training and mainstreaming disaster risk reduction initiative at the national and sub-national level. Mr. Speaker, to demonstrate strong political will on innovative financial solutions, the Fijian government over the past 6 years has committed over $18 million towards disaster response operations. This year, the budget allocates $500,000 towards the Disaster Relief and Rehabilitation Fund that will enable NDMO to act swiftly of any needed humanitarian response on any climate event. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the Fijian government continued to recognize that despite all the best effort, we cannot completely remove risks and disasters as they will somehow or other affect or impact us. To conclude, Mr. Speaker, I would like to highlight that the 2021 IPCC report has warned us that we are almost reaching the tipping point of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Therefore, with less time on our hand, we require an all of society approach to fight this climate emergency together. We also require flexible conditions to disaster and climate finance to bring about more sustainable outcome, including long-term programmatic delivery. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I convey my congratulations to the Honourable Minister of Economy and his Permanent Secretary, Mr. Sri Gaundra, and his dynamic team for this inclusive and forward-looking budget that will steer us out of this unprecedented time. Vinaka, thank you, Honourable Speaker.